on the list of 28 states that have already or are in the process to make this same declaration. I want to take a moment to thank Representative Hughes from New Orleans for his sponsorship of this bill. We had heard from many members of this legislature, and the bipartisan support for our 911 heroes is incredible. The initial version of this bill declared that all 911 professionals shall be considered first responders. After receiving a request from some of my 911 colleagues in the state, an amendment was filed to make the bill permissive and state that the communication district may declare their staff as first responders. In true transparency, I believe the word shall sends a heartfelt and strong message to our heroes that their state legislative officials support them. But I understand the request to change the language to may, which makes the bill permissive and eliminates unintended consequences. Ultimately, all we're looking for is access to resources, training, mental health services, and pay equity amongst our first responding agencies, so we may recruit and retain top talent. I want to be very clear with this committee. Staffing of our emergency communication centers today across the state of Louisiana is challenging. It is very difficult, but we are not in this alone. We find it very hard to attract top talent, as the unemployment rate in Louisiana and the nation is at its all-time low. We're losing our top talent to higher-paying jobs and those that have far less stress. The passage of this bill will not only make a clear statement of support for our 911 professionals, but also provide the communication districts in the state the necessary authority to begin to plan for adjustments to benefits, services, and training to help stabilize staffing. Our communities and your constituents will be able to receive high-quality 911 services, and our emergency communication centers will be a place for our dedicated public servants to thrive yet again. Thank you for your time.
All right, members, I've offered on behalf of Representative Hughes this amendment. Is there on the any objection to adopting the amendment? Seeing none, the amendment's been adopted. Oh, all right. All right. Representative Stagney for a question.
Thank you, Chairman Edmonds. I love the bill. I'm not wild about all the amendments. So you spoke to it briefly. I'd like to know what would be the reasoning behind taking the word shall out in amendment number 6 and replacing it with may, because you talked about unintended consequences. I think there are more unintended consequences by making that very subjective on whether someone would be considered an employee or not, when if they're performing the function, the job, they should be considered under the definition that you're trying to pass this bill. So please give me some insight as to why we should change that to may instead of leaving it as a shall.
Understand. Thank you, sir, for your question. I will say, personally, I believe that the strong declaratory statement of shall is appropriate, but the term of first responder in Louisiana is tied to many different benefits, to include retirement. And if the law comes out that says shall, the communication districts haven't had the time to plan what that would mean to them financially. Retiring with 30 years versus 25 years, this definition will give them access to different retirement systems. We have very many in the state of Louisiana. So a forceful shall, in some regard, will have a phenomenal impact in some communication districts, but those that have very complex benefits that tie to a definition, I'm not sure that the time they've had the opportunity yet to financially prepare for such a declaratory statement.
But you don't think that they could use that as a means to be subjective on what employees they want to include for benefits and ones that they do not?
In my conversation, and I have to say that my role as president of the entire state, I have to make sure that they're all represented as far as their position, no matter how I may feel about it personally. But I do think it's important that the communication districts are individually, there's 64 of them in the state, they would like to have the ability to apply this definition or use this as authority to increase benefits or not, if the organization is having a staffing issue or recruitment. But it may be in 2 years we're back saying we need to say shall now because it has not been applied in a way the intent of the law.
If you want to reward employees for the jobs that they do, and I think it's better to create some type of uniformity as opposed to a piecemeal where in one part of the state you're going to get some benefits, you do the same job somewhere else you may not. I love the bill, but I have some concern over that portion of the amendment. That's all the questions I have. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for his services, Chairman.
Representative Fontenot, is your question on the amendment or is it on the bill?
I guess at this point, I'd like to see anybody's opposition to this amendment, because I kind of concur with Representative.
All right, so we have an amendment that's been offered. Are there any objections to the amendment, or the offering of the amendment? Is your questions on the amendment? Okay. Representative Freiberg for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Colonel, is it Colonel? Is it
Director.
Director? Who would make the decision? Would that be your local city council? Who makes the decision on whether or not someone is considered a first responder or not?
So each communication district, there's many different formations and how they're run. So the local governing authority governs the communication district, particularly in Orleans Parish. There's a state statute that establishes our board, and there's a board of 11 people, and so that would be the body. But there is a board in all communication districts, a board of commissioners, and they would be the one to pass a resolution to interpret what this law means if the word if the amendment is accepted.
Do you think making this a shall would cause any issues or problems for some of the smaller areas or larger? I mean, I see your point with saying maybe we need to transition this. Maybe we come back in 2 years and make this a shall and not may. But do you see a lot of districts that would not want to take advantage of this?
I will say the initial request when speaking with our representative was the shall. We did hear some anecdotal concerns from the smaller districts that haven't had much time to evaluate what the impact would be. And when I speak with them, the questions remain around retirement. So I'll give you an example. Yeah. Those are in a law enforcement system. Once you're declared a first responder, you get access to a different retirement system. That is a benefit that we think will attract top talent to the industry. But of course, it costs a little bit more when you retire at 25 years as opposed to 30. I do believe the communication districts ultimately would love an opportunity to say shall. I just can't speak with certainty that they have prepared for that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Freiberg. Representative Fontenot for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess first and foremost, as it pertains to the amendment, I'll support the amendment because it sounds like you're working on behalf of the entire organization you represent. But if you work for a sheriff's office and you're a dispatcher, you get paid 3 1/3% retirement, correct?
It depends on this individual systems. It seems we all do it 64 different ways.
Mm-hmm. But most dispatchers who work for a police department or work for a sheriff's office, they're in that specific retirement.
Not necessarily, because some of the systems separate the job functions from hazardous versus non-hazardous. And what they use to separate them is the federal classification of 911 telecommunicator. Mm-hmm. And right now, it is classified as clerical. There's a bill sitting currently in Congress to reclassify them as protective service at the federal level to allow them to have equal classification as law enforcement. So if the retirement system has evaluated that particular role and said, you know what, you're not hazardous, you're going to be in the 30-year system, that is the reality for some of our telecommunicators that do work in law enforcement agencies.
So in the city of New Orleans, they have a 911 center that transfers the calls to the respective agency when an emergency comes in?
No, so we are a consolidated center, and the 911 operations is managed by the Communication District, which is a political subdivision of the state of Louisiana. Mm-hmm. We don't transfer calls anywhere. Once we take your call, we make sure you get full and complete service. We are a consolidated center. We answer the phone. We also dispatch for police, fire, EMS, and the SPCA.
And what retirement system are you in?
Right now, we are the New Orleans Municipal retirement system, which right now gets our staff at a 30-year retirement. With this definition, a resolution from our board, if the shall is removed and may is added, we would then petition the New Orleans Municipal Police Department system, or the state laser system has a 25-year retirement available if you have a definition that you are a first responder.
But right now, you're paying 2.5% of your salary. That's how your retirement's based, correct?
I believe it's the staff are paying. I believe it's 5%. Mm-hmm. And the
but
agency
each year
pays
of service is calculated at 2.5%. So you'd have to have 30 years times 2.5. Whereas in the law enforcement community, if we make you a first responder, it would be 3.3. So my question to you is, are we going to have to back pay your retirement if we change you?
I think the retirement administrations will have to determine a plan on how to best execute this, and that's what other states have done. The retirement administrations are independent, and they have the ability to say, hey, do we say if you're hired after this date, you're in this system versus, or you have the option to buy time. If you want to say, hey, I'm going to increase my payments every pay period to catch up. But at the end of the day, when you do retire, your contributions will be equal to those who have left the retirement at 25 years.
Very good. I just want to finish with this. That there should be zero reason why every telecommunications operator is not a first responder.
I agree.
In 30 years of protective service, I could take you back to January 7th, 2001, while I was involved in a lethal force encounter, and the only person I could talk to was that dispatcher. And I could tell you what Dee Dee Como was telling me right now. The information that a 911 dispatcher, a police, what they give you in that 30 seconds to go to that call is immeasurable. The importance of who we're looking for, what we're looking for, what type of weapon we're looking for, the information. When a dispatcher would go on lunch and I had to sit at that computer for 45 minutes, it was the most grueling 45 minutes that I could spend in a day's time, listening to people holler and scream and understand what they're trying to tell me and make sure I get the right person there. So I'm going to go with this amendment strictly because you're asking us to, but truly every person who takes a call for an emergency should be considered a first responder. So I appreciate what everybody here that takes those calls do. Is immeasurable for a first responder, the information they get on the way going to a scene. So thank you for what you do.
Thank you, Representative. And I can give one more piece to you. You know, you talked about your experience as a law enforcement officer. I would be remiss if I didn't mention how dramatically different the industry is now. In the last 3 years, and particularly in New Orleans, we now have video and picture to 911. So our staff could very well see a heinous incident happen in front of them in real time. It puts us on the scene, and not to mention all the other things that are happening around us. And so it definitely, this is appropriate. You will be the 28th state to take this action. You know, some states have just said it is what it is and let the districts figure it out. Or, you know, we're trying our best not to adversely impact anybody, but we have to balance what the impact is based upon what is just right. What is the right thing to do?
I'll just say, Representative Fontenot, and I appreciate your comments, and certainly Chairman Stagney and Representative Freiberg and all of you. Let me just say, speaking for everybody at this table, none of us are thrilled about these amendments. I don't like them at all. At the end of the day, Director Morris put in a lot of hours negotiating with his colleagues in various communications districts around the state. And so these amendments are in the spirit of compromise. I will say the lines of communication remain open. I will be challenging Director Morris to go back to the negotiating table to talk to his colleagues and let him know what the temperature of this committee is and many of our colleagues, because I do think that the bill in its original posture, we owe it to these employees and these unsung heroes.
Yeah, I could see in with this amendment though, where if you have, I don't know how many employees you have in city of New Orleans, but I assume
182.
I could see where if we had to go back and pay these retirements, we could be talking about a substantial reinvestment on the city to get them up to a 3 1/3 retirement in the 25 years. And in addition to, at 25 years in the sheriff's office system, you get entitled to a specific amount of health benefits, mental health services. We went back as this body and added specific post-traumatic stress into workers' comp for emergency responders that you don't have right now.
Right.
So
and we need it.
I agree. So there are some financial implications that could affect large cities like New Orleans, where potentially, and Fire District 3 haven't showed up here, but they're on their way from Galliano. We went through this with them, and they end up filing suit. The employees filed suit to back pay their retirement. So we don't want to, be jamming any cities or having negative effects over this. But you guys definitely should be first responders.
I appreciate it. I will say this. I'm going to be very clear and transparent. There's a bill sitting right now that has bipartisan support from the House and the Senate to do this across the nation. So this is our attempt to let Louisiana get ahead of this so we can be as prudent as possible with what the writing on the wall is. I mean, now we have a majority of the states have taken this declaratory statement, and some had some staunch opposition for the very reasons that you said, and some of the bodies said, again, it's the right thing to do. Figure it out. We figured out much more complex things than this. And so, again, as Representative Hughes said, this is in a spirit of compromise, and we absolutely will go back and have a very broad conversation about just that. What is the right thing to do versus what is absolutely possible.
All right. Thank you, Representative Fontenot. Representative Farnham for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I, too, think that this is a good bill, but I absolutely support the amendment because without a fiscal note to know how this is going to negatively impact, or could, I don't know if it will or not, on the shall portion of it. On the may, everybody will have the right to implement this if they choose to. So the people that are pushing for it will most likely immediately implement. But the places, there are some very poor parishes in this state, municipalities that would be forced with an unfunded mandate to bring something up, and they probably don't have the same issues with retaining their employees that some of the bigger areas do. They're most likely small hometown people that are going to stay in that job, and it's the only job they have available to them, and they love it, and they'd like for their local government not to go broke over it. So I absolutely support the amendment, but I like the idea that you're going to let it play out for a couple of years and see how it does affect them. Because I don't know, when would the effective date of this be? Immediately upon signature?
My understanding is that when the governor, if it passed, the governor signed, then the communication districts could at their next meeting take an action.
Yeah.
In that regard.
But if it's a shall, they have to. They will have no choice but to take action. So I like the idea that let's revisit this in a couple of years and see how it affected them. Everybody may jump on the boat and say, look, they deserve it, and they absolutely deserve it, and we can afford it. So they may all jump in and say, let's do it. And then there won't be any opposition to the shall after a period of time. But to come in and say, at the end of this session, you guys are going to pay all this, and that's just unfair to each one of the communities at this point. I think eventually it needs to be a shall.
Absolutely, I appreciate it. And I will. We talk a lot about retirement benefits, but Representative Fontenot, thank you for your understanding of the complete services that our team needs, but also around pay equity, right? And so when we're doing compensation classification studies, you group organizations based on roles and how they're classified. This would allow us to classify these positions along with our first field responders. You know, I learned in the state of Louisiana, it's about 460 hours to get your law enforcement post certification level 1. It's 690 hours in my organization to be certified as a call taker. So that alone tells you that the amount of investment and training and skill that's required is that or even greater. And so this will allow us to really evaluate salaries and plan next budget cycle to really attract top talent, because I am losing people to jobs that pay much more and a quarter of the stress.
And that's a key component of the May at this point. It's going to eliminate that issue for the people that choose to enact that immediately. But I thank you for being here today and taking this on, Representative Hughes.
All right. Thank you. Ms. Wright, just let's get a little clarification on the
So I just want to make sure, did you guys say?
Yeah, we still have to adopt.
No, I know. I just wanted to make sure that this bill, there's nothing in bill that says it's effective on signature of the governor.
We can add that in.
I
We
just
can
wanna
either
make-
add gov
is that
signature.
what
We
you-
could add July 1st, August 1st. We could either do it here. We could work on it between here and the floor.
I just was making sure.
No,
because-
we were just talking about that.
Okay, so
So-
do you don't want to add that now? You just want to talk
I
about?
think we want to land on either governor's signature or a date. So I'd prefer to just work on it between
Okay.
here.
Representative Hughes, just let's just get it between here and the floor.
Okay.
Perfect.
All
And
right.
s-
All right, now the board is clear on the amendment. Any questions on the amendment? All right, we have I have moved forward on this. So is any objections to the adoption of the amendment? Seeing none, the amendment is the bill is adopted. Amendment is adopted. Are there any other questions on the bill? All right, Representative Hughes, would you like to close?
Chairman, thank you for your graciousness, committee, and I would just ask that you move favorable.
All right, I have missed some cards here. I think there's some others that I want to read in. There may be some that want to come to the table. Randy Haney is here, and would you like to speak? Good. You're good? Your waves. Okay. Also, Tyrell Morris is here. All right. Good. And Bill, is it Shalmaron? Is that right? Good morning.
Thank you.
Please introduce yourself to the committee.
Yeah, good morning. My name is Bill Salmon. I'm Chief of New Orleans EMS. And I'm here to support House Bill 392 that proposes to consider emergency communications district staff as first responders. And I want to thank Director Morris, Representative Hughes, and other 911 leadership to make this happen. The 911 center folks are a critical part of emergency response. They are an important link in the chain of survival for many people. And so we're fortunate in New Orleans to have a communications district handle all 911 emergency calls for service, being the calm voice on the phone, providing life-saving instructions before help arrives, and ensuring that the right people get to the right place at the right time. As a field responder, I have always appreciated our communicators and know how essential they are, as they are the first link in the emergency response chain and help us bring order to the chaos that we encounter on the streets. I'm happy to see the nationwide movement in recent years to better align communications staff with field responders, as their role is equally important and can be just as stressful and traumatic and deserve the same support resources that other first responders do as well. I want to thank you for your time and attention. I look forward to this bill being reported favorably. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Trey Caruso is in favor but not wishing to speak. Kerry Koch, Representative Chief of Police Association, is in favor, not wishing to speak. Scott Kirkpatrick in favor, not wishing to speak. We have no red cards or white cards. All right, Representative Farnham has moved favorably. Are there any objections? As amended. Seeing none, HB 392 will be reported favorably. Thank you, Representative Hughes.
Thank you, Chairman and colleagues.
All right, let's take up Representative Adams is here. Representative Adams, if you come and let's read in his bill, HB 216.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 216 creates the Myrtle Hill Crime Prevention and Improvement District in East Baton Rouge Parish.